You
Another
must come with
man
me
made her
now.
laugh.
The
The
Lord will
Alpha
not
King
wait for
said,
your
"That
decision.
smile is mine,"
We don't have
and
much
kissed her
time
in front
before
of
they
her.
realize you are gone.
Stone corridors wound like serpents around the ancient castle, and flickering torchlight danced across tapestries that told stories of kings and queens long past. Outside, the wind carried a chill that promised storms, while inside, the court was a study in restrained elegance, heavy with gold, velvet, and secrets. Seraphine moved through the grand ballroom like a candle flame in the darkness. She was young, her laughter a rare thing in a place where smiles were usually measured and polite. Tonight, though, something in her felt free, almost rebellious. A visiting noble, Darien, had said something unexpectedly witty, and Seraphine's laughter had spilled out without warning. It was the kind of sound that cut through the cold decorum of the court. Heads turned, eyes widened, whispers stirred like a gentle wind. But the most dangerous gaze of all belonged to King Thalric. Thalric had the reputation of a man who needed no introduction. His presence was sharp, like a blade. Broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell like midnight waves over his forehead, and eyes that seemed to see straight into the heart of anyone who dared meet them, he was both feared and admired. To see him now, standing near the throne, was to feel the air itself thicken. He had noticed her laughter. Of course he had. Nothing escaped him. The Alpha King's gaze fell on Seraphine, lingering, intense. For a moment she met his eyes across the crowded hall. There was something almost feral in his stare, a silent command that made her breath hitch. She tried to look away, but her body refused. Her heart betrayed her, thudding in a rhythm she had never known in the calm of polite life. Darien, unaware of the storm brewing in the king's mind, leaned closer. "You have the kind of laugh that could start a revolution," he whispered, his voice teasing but warm. Seraphine felt her cheeks flush, delighted despite herself. She was used to admiration in small doses, but this was different. Light and reckless, it made her feel seen. But Thalric's reaction was immediate. The court seemed to fall away around him, leaving only the king and the young noblewoman who dared to laugh in his presence. His steps were silent yet commanding, each one bringing him closer to her, until the shadows of the ballroom seemed to bend toward his form. Darien noticed too late. "Seraphine," he started, but his words faltered as the king approached. There was a tension in the air, a charge that made the candles flicker as if sensing the storm. And then, with a movement as swift and inevitable as night swallowing day, Thalric reached Seraphine. His hand brushed her arm, not cruelly but with a force that made her pulse spike, and before she could fully understand what was happening, he leaned in. His lips touched hers. The world seemed to freeze. A gasp rose from the crowd. Some noblewomen clutched their fans. Men's faces were rigid with shock. Darien's jaw went slack. Seraphine's own mind seemed to splinter. The kiss was not just an act of possession. It was a declaration, a command, a claim that seemed older than time itself. When he stepped back, his gaze never leaving hers, the court was silent. The weight of what had just occurred hung over them like a storm cloud. Seraphine's heart was racing, not entirely from fear, but from a thrill she didn't understand. Thalric, for his part, allowed nothing to show on his face but the faintest shadow of satisfaction. "Your laughter," he said, his voice low and rich, carrying through the tense silence, "is mine." The words struck her more sharply than the kiss ever could. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words felt weak in comparison to the power in his voice. He had claimed her, and yet there was a pull in his eyes, a dangerous softness beneath the Alpha King's unyielding exterior. Darien's hand hovered near her, unsure whether to step forward or stay frozen in disbelief. Seraphine realized with a strange clarity that her heart was caught between two storms, one warm and playful, one dark and irresistible. The court buzzed after a few long moments, whispers finally breaking free. Did the king? He kissed her. In front of Darien, murmurs floated like autumn leaves, each one heavier than the last. Seraphine felt every pair of eyes in the room upon her, judging, curious, admiring, or jealous. Her cheeks burned and her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She felt unsteady, like a leaf caught in a gale. Yet amidst the chaos of her emotions, there was a strange thrill. She had seen a new side of Thalric, a side not just of authority and fear, but of a man who could be dangerous in ways she did not yet understand. Later, in the quiet of the castle corridors, Seraphine wandered alone, the echoes of her laughter still lingering in her ears. The night outside was wild, the wind whipping around the stone towers, carrying the scent of rain and the distant sea. She leaned against the cold wall, trying to steady herself, and wondered if she had imagined the softness in Thalric's eyes, or if it had been real. A shadow moved from the darkness and she turned instinctively. Thalric's figure emerged from the gloom, silent as a panther. There was a tension between them, unspoken, electric. "You cannot run from what has begun," he said quietly. His voice, though softer than in the ballroom, carried that same undeniable weight. "You may not understand it yet, but the moment I saw you laugh, I knew you were not just another noble to amuse me. You are different." Seraphine swallowed, her pulse quickening. "Different how?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, the shadows around him bending like dark silk. "Different enough to challenge me, different enough to make me feel alive." Her stomach tightened. Alive. That word, spoken from the lips of a man who ruled fear and fire, was dangerous. It was a spark in the darkness, one that could either consume her or guide her through the shadows. Darian, meanwhile, watched from afar, his expression unreadable. He had followed her quietly after the banquet, but he did not approach. He sensed the invisible walls that now surrounded Seraphine, walls built from both desire and power. He could see the change in her, the subtle pull toward Thalric, and it filled him with a mix of awe and unease. The tension between the three of them was fragile, a web spun with threads of longing, curiosity, and unspoken emotion. Each glance, each pause carried weight. Each heartbeat was louder than the last, echoing in the cold halls of the castle. Seraphine knew one thing with absolute clarity: life in Castle Valor would never be the same. The laughter that once seemed so innocent now felt like a spark in a tinderbox, one that had drawn the attention of a man who could both protect and destroy her. She walked to the edge of the balcony, overlooking the forested valley below. The wind tugged at her hair and she let the storm of feelings wash over her. She could hear the faint echo of her laughter, carried far into the night by the wind. A hand on her shoulder made her spin. Thalric was there again, silent, watching. The wind whipped around them, tugging at his cloak and hair. He did not speak immediately, only watched her, and in his gaze was a storm she could feel in her bones. "You will not be safe here," he said finally, voice low. "Not from others and not from yourself." Seraphine's pulse quickened. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He leaned closer, so close that she could feel the warmth of him even in the chill night air. "Because," he said softly, "your laughter, it is mine to protect, whether you wish it or not." For a moment the wind seemed to stop. The world narrowed to two figures on a balcony, the forest below and the storm above. Seraphine felt a shiver run through her body, not from the cold but from the intensity of being seen, truly seen, by someone so powerful. Before she could respond, he stepped back, disappearing into the shadows as silently as he had arrived. The echoes of his presence lingered, leaving her trembling and breathless. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart, and realized that her life had changed forever in the span of a single night. Darian's voice called from the doorway behind her, tentative and hesitant. "Seraphine, are you all right?" She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. He was concerned, yet there was an unspoken question there, a recognition that something monumental had occurred between her and the king. She nodded faintly, unable to find words that could contain the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions inside her. The balcony seemed impossibly high, the forest below endless and dark, but Seraphine felt a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time she felt the weight of possibility pressing on her, heavy but exhilarating. Somewhere in the castle, Thalric watched from the shadows, a single thought etched into his mind: that laughter is mine, and I will not let it go. And in that moment, Seraphine understood that her world, once safe and predictable, had shifted. The storm was only beginning, and she was standing right at its center. The morning sun barely touched the castle walls when Seraphine awoke. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind, relentless and vivid. The kiss, the declaration, the weight in Thalric's gaze, it was all there, impossible to forget. She sat at the edge of her bed, her fingers tracing the folds of her gown, trying to convince herself it had been a fleeting moment, a strange dream born from the tension of the court. But deep down, she knew it was real. The halls of Castle Valor seemed different now. Shadows stretched longer, corners seemed darker, and even the flicker of a candle felt alive, as though it knew of the storm brewing in her heart. She dressed slowly, each movement deliberate, each breath a careful negotiation between fear and curiosity. Today she would see Thalric again, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. Darian appeared as she left her chambers, his steps quiet on the polished stone floor. His eyes, normally warm and teasing, held concern today. "You look troubled," he said softly. "Are you sure you're all right?" Seraphine hesitated. I don't know," she admitted. Her gaze dropped to the floor, unsure whether she should reveal the truth of last night. "It's complicated." Darian nodded, understanding more than she said. "It is," he agreed. "You laughed and the king claimed you. I can see it has shaken you." Her lips pressed together. "It's more than that," she whispered. "There's something about him, something I don't understand." Darian's gaze softened, but he said nothing more, knowing that words could not untangle the pull she felt toward Thalric. Instead, he offered her a small, reassuring smile, the kind that made her feel both safe and alive. The king's chambers were a world apart from the rest of the castle. Heavy velvet curtains blocked the morning light, and the walls were lined with relics from battles long past. Armor stood silent like ghosts, and the scent of aged wood and fire lingered in the air. Thalric sat behind a desk of dark oak, his posture regal and unreadable, yet the moment he saw Seraphine enter, a subtle shift passed over his expression. "You came," he said, voice smooth but edged with the power of command. Seraphine curtsied slightly, her stomach tight. "I did," she replied. "You wished to speak with me." He gestured for her to sit across from him, and she obeyed, her heart pounding in her chest. Thalric's eyes never left hers. There was an intensity there that made the air feel thick, as if every word she spoke was weighed and measured. "You are aware of the effect you have," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. "Your laughter, it is not ordinary. It pierces, it awakens, it unsettles the balance of this court." Seraphine blinked, startled. I never meant to cause trouble," she murmured. "Intent matters little," he replied. "Power is not always conscious, and yours it is powerful." A shiver ran down her spine. Power. She had never thought of her laughter as anything but light and innocent, yet the way he said it made her feel dangerous. And in that danger, there was a thrill she could not deny. The tension between them was a silent thread, taut and electric. Seraphine struggled with her own emotions. There was Darian, whose warmth felt safe, comforting, and natural. And then there was Thalric, whose presence was commanding, dangerous, and yet oddly comforting in its own way. Her heart felt divided, caught between light and shadow, laughter and longing. Thalric, ever perceptive, seemed to sense her inner turmoil. "Do you understand what you are to me?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Not just a noblewoman of the court, but something more." She shook her head slowly. "I don't understand it at all," she admitted. "I feel drawn to you, but I also feel afraid." A flicker of something softened in his eyes, a rare glimpse beyond the Alpha King's mask of control. "Fear is natural," he said, But it is not weakness. It is a signal of what you could be if you allow yourself to step beyond it. Her breath caught. His words were both terrifying and liberating. For a moment, she imagined stepping closer, letting herself trust him fully. And in that fleeting fantasy, she felt a warmth bloom in her chest, one that was entirely unfamiliar and frightening in its intensity. The day passed slowly. Seraphine could not escape the feeling of being watched, the weight of invisible eyes upon her. Servants whispered as she passed, nobles lingered with sidelong glances, and the memory of Thalric's words and touch haunted her. Darian tried to offer distractions, small games of wit, gentle conversation, but she found herself responding only half-heartedly. Her mind wandered to the king, to the fire and ice in his gaze, to the strange pull she felt toward him. Evenings were the hardest. The castle, emptied of daytime activity, became a stage for shadows. Seraphine found herself wandering the corridors, seeking solace in the quiet, yet feeling the ever-present eyes of Thalric watching her, unseen but undeniable. At dinner, she sat across from Darian, yet her thoughts were elsewhere. He laughed at a jest she barely heard, and the sound should have brought her joy, but it felt muted, incomplete. Her heart, it seemed, was no longer entirely hers. Thalric entered the hall just as the last light of day slipped through the windows. His presence silenced the chatter immediately. Even the musicians paused mid-note. He scanned the room, and when his gaze fell on Seraphine, the air seemed to bend around her. Without a word, he moved to stand beside her. The world felt smaller, narrower, as though he carried the weight of the castle and the forest with him. His hand brushed against her arm once, deliberately, sending a shiver through her. "You are not like the others," he murmured, almost to himself. "And that frightens me, yet it excites me. You challenge me in ways no one else dares." Seraphine felt her cheeks burn. "Challenge you?" she asked softly. "Your laughter," he said, his gaze piercing hers. "Your smile, it is not just a sound, it is a flame." And flames are dangerous, Seraphine. They can warm or burn, they can protect or destroy, but I cannot look away from it. Darian's expression shifted slightly, though he said nothing. He could see the invisible threads tying Seraphine and Thalric together, threads that were both magnetic and dangerous. His heart ached in ways he could not name, yet he remained, hoping somehow she would not be lost entirely to the storm that was the Alpha King. That night Seraphine could not sleep. She wandered the castle restless. The corridors were quiet, almost too quiet. Her footsteps echoed, and each sound reminded her of the power that loomed nearby, the presence of Thalric, the intensity that seemed to cling to her like a second skin. She found herself on the balcony again, looking out over the forested valley below. The wind tugged at her hair, whispering secrets she could not understand. Somewhere, deep in the distance, a storm rumbled. It was as if the world itself knew that her life had shifted, that the delicate balance she had known was gone forever. A shadow fell over her and she turned instinctively. Thalric stepped into the moonlight, his expression unreadable, yet the pull she felt toward him was immediate and undeniable. "You cannot fight it," he said softly, stepping closer. "The bond between us, it has begun. You may feel afraid and you may resist, but your heart, it knows." Seraphine trembled, torn between the pull of desire and the weight of fear. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You will," he said, his voice firm yet gentle, "because you want to. You want to feel alive, even if you do not understand it yet." Her breath caught in her throat. The words were both promise and warning, a reflection of the tension that had settled over her like a storm cloud. She could not deny the attraction, the strange, consuming energy that radiated from him, nor could she ignore the fear of what that energy might demand of her. Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Thalric tested boundaries, drawing her into moments of quiet intimacy, brief and charged with unspoken emotion. Sometimes it was a hand brushing hers, a look that lingered too long, a word whispered in passing. Each small act left her breathless, her heart racing, and filled with a longing she could not name. Darien, patient and kind, continued to be her friend and confidant, but even he could see the inevitable. The Alpha King's influence was not subtle. It was magnetic, almost impossible to resist. Seraphine felt caught between two worlds, one warm, safe, and familiar with Darien, and one dark, thrilling, and consuming with Thalric. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood, Thalric found her alone in the gardens. The roses glowed in the twilight, and the air smelled of rain yet to fall. He approached quietly, and she felt the familiar pull in her chest. "You are restless," he observed, his voice low. "I cannot stop thinking," she admitted, "about everything, about you, about last night, about what is happening to me." Thalric's gaze softened, but the intensity remained. "That is the beginning," he said. "The beginning of what could be if you allow it. Fear is natural, but it cannot control you. You must choose whether to step into the fire or to stay in the shadows." Her heart raced. "And if I step into the fire?" "Then," he said, taking a careful step closer, "you will see who I truly am and perhaps discover who you truly are as well." The night air grew heavy, charged with unspoken promises and dangerous longing. Seraphine felt the pull of something vast, something beyond the rules of court and duty. She felt alive, trembling on the edge of a choice she could not yet fully understand. The morning fog lay thick over Castle Valor, curling around the towers and winding through the valleys below. It was a day of quiet tension, the kind that made the air feel heavier than usual. Seraphine walked along the outer corridors, her thoughts a tangle of emotions she could neither name nor escape. The memory of Thalric's hand brushing hers in the garden still lingered, a constant warmth in the chill morning. And Darien's laughter, his gentle teasing, his steady presence, was a light she could not deny, though it now felt distant, shadowed by the pull of the Alpha King. She paused at the edge of the balcony, the fog curling around her like a living thing. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, dark and mysterious. Somewhere deep in the trees, an owl called, and the echo seemed to carry a warning. "You look troubled." Startled, Seraphine turned. Thalric stepped from the shadows, silent as ever, his expression unreadable. Even in the soft morning light, he carried an air of command that made her chest tighten. "I am," she admitted softly. I cannot understand why I feel this way. You frighten me, yet I cannot stay away." Thalric's eyes softened, the rare vulnerability flickering briefly across his face. "Because the bond between us is not simple," he said. "It was never meant to be." "Then why?" her words faltered. "Because I am cursed," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "A man like me cannot love freely. I was bound long before you arrived, and this bond, it is dangerous for anyone who draws near." Seraphine's heart skipped. "Cursed," he nodded. "Yes, I am tied to the Alpha throne by forces older than this kingdom. I can command, I can protect, but love, real love, it has always been a threat. I cannot touch it without risk. I cannot let anyone near me without danger." The weight of his words pressed on her chest, heavy and suffocating. "And yet you claim me. Why?" "Because," he said, stepping closer, "your laughter is a spark in the darkness. It awakened something in me that I thought was gone forever, and now that spark burns too brightly to ignore. I cannot let it fade. I cannot let you fade." Seraphine felt a tremor run through her body. The idea of a man so powerful, so feared, yet so fragile in certain ways was overwhelming. And yet, despite the danger, she felt drawn to him like a moth to fire. The day dragged on, each hour stretching longer than the last. Seraphine attempted to focus on her duties in the court, but her mind wandered. Every glance, every movement reminded her of Thalric. The Alpha King's presence was everywhere, even when he was not in the same room. It was as if the castle itself bent to him, shaping the shadows and light to his will, leaving her both entranced and unnerved. Darien appeared later, as he often did, offering gentle conversation to distract her from her thoughts. They walked through the rose gardens where petals glowed softly in the fading light. His laughter, light and sincere, made her smile, yet a hollow feeling settled in her chest. "You seem distant," Darian said softly. "Is it the king?" Seraphine hesitated. "Yes," she admitted. "But it is more than that. There is something about him, something I cannot understand. I feel both afraid and drawn to him. I don't know what to do." Darian reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Whatever happens, Seraphine, you must follow your heart. It knows more than you think, but be careful, he is not like others." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now." That night the castle was silent except for the crackle of fire in the great hall. Seraphine had wandered there, drawn by an instinct she did not understand. Thalric appeared as if summoned, his eyes catching the firelight, sharp and unreadable. "You should not wander alone," he said, stepping closer. "The castle is full of shadows, some of which are not natural." "I cannot stay in my chambers," she said honestly. "The walls, they feel too small now. I cannot think, I cannot rest. Everything is changing." Thalric studied her for a long moment. "It is not only the castle," he said finally. "It is you. You are changing too. Your bond with me, it is stronger than you realize. It touches things you cannot see yet." "Bond?" Seraphine asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What do you mean?" He reached out, hesitating only a moment before letting his hand hover near hers. The air between them seemed to vibrate, charged with energy. "I mean," he said, "that once you step closer to me, there will be no turning back. The curse that binds me, it will reach you too. You must understand the risk before you allow yourself to feel what you feel." Seraphine's pulse quickened. I want to understand," she admitted. "But I am afraid." "Fear is natural," he said, his voice softening. "But it is not weakness. It is a signal of what is important. It shows that your heart knows more than your mind dares admit." She looked down, her hands trembling. "And what if I fail? What if I cannot handle you?" "You will not fail," he said firmly, though there was an edge of something unspoken in his voice. "Because even if the curse is strong, even if the darkness is deep, there is a part of me that longs to be free. And that part exists because of you." Her breath caught. The words were a promise, yet they carried the weight of warning. She wanted to trust him, wanted to step closer, but the fear of the unknown made her hesitate. The following days were filled with tension. Thalric tested her boundaries, drawing her into moments of quiet intimacy, small touches, lingering looks, subtle words that carried more meaning than any formal statement could. Each moment left her breathless, uncertain, and exhilarated all at once. Darian, patient and kind, continued to offer companionship, yet even he could see the invisible threads tying her to the Alpha King. His heart ached as he watched her drawn deeper into a storm he could not reach. Still, he remained loyal, offering her guidance and comfort whenever she needed it. One evening, Thalric took her to the ancient library of the castle, a place few were allowed. Shadows stretched across the towering shelves, and the air smelled of old parchment and candle wax. He guided her to a secluded corner, where a single window let in a sliver of moonlight. "This," he said softly, gesturing to the books around them, "contains knowledge of the world, of magic, and of curses like mine. I brought you here because you must understand what binds me before you can truly choose." Seraphine's eyes widened. "I want to understand," she said. "I want to know everything, even if it frightens me." Thalric smiled faintly, a rare softness passing over his features. "Bravery is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is the willingness to face it." Hours passed as he showed her texts and relics, explaining the history of the Alpha Throne, the ancient curse that had shaped his life, and the dangers that anyone who came close would face. Seraphine listened intently, absorbing every word. She realized that loving him, stepping into his world, was not simply a choice of the heart. It was a leap into the unknown, into darkness and light intertwined. The tension between them reached a breaking point one night in the moonlit gardens. The roses glowed softly, the petals wet with dew. Thalric approached, silent, and she felt the familiar pull in her chest. "You have seen the truth," he said softly. "The curse, the dangers, the shadows, and yet you are still here. Why?" "I am here," she said, her voice trembling, because I cannot stay away. I do not understand why, but I cannot." He took her hand gently, the warmth of his touch sending a shiver through her. "Then you are ready," he whispered, "ready to step beyond fear, to face the storm and perhaps to help me find freedom." Her heart pounded in her chest. The night seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Every instinct in her screamed caution, yet every beat of her heart drew her closer. Before she could respond, a distant sound echoed through the trees, soft, deliberate, and unfamiliar. Thalric tensed immediately, releasing her hand and moving toward the edge of the garden. Seraphine followed, her pulse racing. "Something comes," he said, his voice low, edged with warning. "The shadows of the past, they are awakening." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, a figure emerged from the fog, cloaked in darkness. Darian. His expression was serious, his eyes full of concern and something deeper, fear perhaps, or despair. "Seraphine," he called, voice urgent. "You need to leave. Now. The king, there are things he cannot control, and you." "Darian," she said, stepping forward, torn between him and Thalric. "What is happening?" Thalric's eyes blazed in the moonlight. "The past is not done with me," he said, "and anyone who comes close to me will face it. You, Seraphine, must choose. Will you step into the fire or stay in the shadows forever?" Seraphine's heart leapt. The moment had come. The choice she had been resisting, the pull she could no longer ignore, pressed upon her with all the weight of the castle, the forest, and the night. She looked between Darian and Thalric, knowing that her decision would change everything. The storm had arrived. Rain fell in sheets over Castle Valor, turning the stone walls into glistening mirrors of light and shadow. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled through the mountains, shaking the very foundations of the ancient fortress. Within the castle, tension mirrored the chaos outside. Seraphine stood in the great hall, her cloak soaked and clinging to her form, the echoes of the past days heavy on her heart. Darian had returned earlier, pleading for her safety, his eyes full of concern and urgency. "Seraphine, you must leave with me," he had shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the storm. "The curse of the Alpha King, it's more dangerous than anyone knows." But Seraphine could not. She felt the pull of Thalric in every heartbeat, in every breath. She had glimpsed the man behind the legend, the one who longed for freedom and love. She could not abandon him, not when he needed her as much as she needed him. Thalric appeared at the far end of the hall, his figure towering, cloak drenched, eyes blazing with a storm that rivaled the one outside. He did not approach immediately. Instead, he stood in the shadows, watching her, calculating and yet vulnerable. "You came," Seraphine said softly, her voice carrying over the roar of the wind. "I never left," he replied, stepping forward. "And you should not leave, not now, not when the danger is here." The tension in the room was palpable. Darian's jaw tightened, but he did not step forward. He knew this confrontation was not his to resolve. Seraphine felt her pulse quicken. She was caught between two men, between safety and passion, between the fear of the curse and the pull of her own heart. Thalric approached slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Seraphine," he said, voice low and commanding, "the curse that binds me is awakening fully tonight. If you step forward, you will face its power. You will see the darkness in me. And yet I cannot protect you unless you trust me completely." Seraphine took a deep breath. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her. She felt fear, yes, but also determination. She had come too far to turn back now. "I trust you," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Thalric's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "Then we begin," he whispered, guiding her toward the center of the hall, where the floor was marked with ancient runes etched into the stone. The symbols glowed faintly in the dim light, pulsing like a heartbeat. "This is the place where the curse was bound," he explained. "It is where I was chained to the throne, and it is where it can be undone, but only if you are willing to face it with me." Seraphine's heart pounded. "I am ready," she said, and though her voice wavered, she meant it. The ritual began. Thalric raised his hands, the air around them thrumming with energy. Shadows twisted, responding to the ancient magic that had held him for centuries. Seraphine felt the weight of it, a force pressing against her, testing her courage, her resolve, and her trust. "You must focus," Thalric said, his hand brushing hers briefly. "Our bond, our trust, that is what will break this curse. Not force, not magic alone, only the heart." Seraphine nodded. She closed her eyes and let herself feel fear, longing, love, and hope. She reached for him, her hands finding his. The connection was electric, stronger than anything she had ever felt. The runes glowed brighter, responding to the sincerity of their emotions. Darian watched from the shadows, his heart aching. He had come to help her, to protect her, but he knew he could not interfere. This was hers and Thalric's battle, and as much as it pained him, he understood that the bond between them was beyond his reach. The shadows twisted violently and the air seemed to crackle with energy. Thalric's voice rang out, commanding yet pained. "Seraphine, focus. Do not let the darkness touch your heart." She tightened her grip on his hands, drawing courage from the warmth of his touch. "I will not let it," she shouted, her voice strong against the storm. "I trust you, we are together." For a moment the shadows recoiled, as if sensing the strength of their bond. The storm outside seemed to mirror the power inside the hall, lightning striking in rhythm with the pulse of the runes. And then, the final challenge. The shadows formed into a figure, a manifestation of Thalric's past, his fear, and the curse itself. It towered over them, a dark, twisting force that seemed almost alive. Its voice echoed, deep and threatening. "You cannot escape me," it said, "Alpha King. And you cannot claim what is mine, little human." Seraphine's grip on Thalric tightened. "You are not mine," she shouted, stepping forward. "But I choose to stand with him, I choose to fight with him, and together we are stronger than you." Thalric's eyes blazed and the energy in the hall surged. "Yes," he roared, "together." Their hands clasped tightly, hearts beating in unison. The figure of darkness faltered, swayed, and then with a final roar that shook the castle, it dissolved into nothingness. The runes on the floor faded, leaving only the stone beneath their feet. Silence fell. The storm outside subsided, leaving only the gentle patter of rain and the occasional distant roll of thunder. Seraphine and Thalric stood together, breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. The bond between them, tested by magic, fear, and trust, had proven stronger than any curse. Darian stepped forward cautiously, offering a small, pained smile. "It's over," he said softly. "You are safe now." Seraphine nodded, gratitude and love shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Darian, for everything, but my place is here with him." Darian's shoulders sagged, but he understood. He had loved her in his own way, but he could not claim her heart. I understand," he said. "Be happy, Seraphine, truly." Thalric watched silently, a shadow of pain still lingering, but he reached for her hand, and the gesture said more than words ever could. The next morning the castle felt different. The weight of the curse had lifted, leaving the halls lighter, the shadows softer. Seraphine walked beside Thalric through the gardens, their fingers entwined. The roses glowed in the morning sun, and the air was fresh, scented with rain and earth. "I feel free," Seraphine whispered. "Not just because the curse is gone, but because I am with you." Thalric's eyes softened, the fire in them still there but tempered by love. "And I feel alive," he said. "For the first time in centuries I can love without fear, because you taught me trust, courage, and what it means to truly feel." They stopped at the balcony overlooking the valley. The fog had cleared and the mountains rose proudly in the distance. Thalric pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "Your smile is not mine to own," he said softly, but it is mine to protect always." Seraphine laughed softly, the sound light and free, no longer weighted with fear. "And I am yours to stand beside," she said. Together they watched the sun rise over the kingdom, knowing that whatever storms might come, they would face them together. Shadows may linger and darkness may rise, but they had found in each other a bond stronger than fear, stronger than magic, stronger than any curse. The court soon adjusted to the new reality. Whispers of the Alpha King's curse being broken spread quickly, and Seraphine was no longer just a noblewoman. She was a symbol of courage, love, and transformation. Thalric ruled not just with power, but with heart, his presence commanding respect without fear. And Seraphine, by his side, brought warmth, laughter, and hope to a kingdom that had long known only shadows. In the quiet moments when the storm had passed and the castle was still, they would walk together through the corridors, through the gardens, or sit in the library among the ancient books. And in those moments, Seraphine would look at Thalric and feel the depth of the journey they had traveled, the trials, the fear, the magic, the longing, and know that every step had led them here. The past, with its curses and shadows, had been faced. The present, with its love and trust, was theirs to cherish. And the future, well, the future was theirs to write, together, hand in hand, hearts bound and laughter echoing through the halls of Castle Valor.